What time is it? It's time for another Every Other Wednesday.
Do you have the music ready?
I do have the music ready. And I've learned from my past mistakes. I just always can't wait to see who's going to be with us today. And they're already coming in. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Who's already coming
I'm
in.
not going to lie to you. As they're coming in right now, in my head is playing The Locomotion.
Yeah. Now,
Everybody's doing. Sorry.
If you're looking for Jeff and Mike, you're going to have to look a long way from here. Hello, Steve Spruill. Because all you got is Richard and Sanjay today. So, but we're gonna make it worth it.
We should just put up pictures of them. So
there you go. We should have them just log in with their static picture.
Exactly.
But I don't know. Mike's in Yukon.
Yeah.
Pam is joining us from Wasilla, Alaska,
which is right near Yukon. So
I know exactly. Yeah. I have been to Wasilla, Alaska, but Jamie Rasmussen here. Good morning. I was saying when Mike said he was going to Yukon, I said, I'm not going to Yukon. It must be very crowded. Everybody I know is going to Yukon because Jeff had just been there a couple of weeks ago.
So all the cool kids doing it. I'm not going to lie though, growing up during March Madness, and I saw shirts that said Yukon for University of Connecticut.
Right, University of Connecticut.
Yukon, and I'm like, what? It's just
yeah. Hi, Carol.
Quickly, as you're coming in, if you have not changed, some people it defaults to everyone on the chat box, some people doesn't. So we'll just remind you to change it to default to everyone. So if you do share a comment, we can all share from your wisdom.
Right. West Los Angeles is in the house. There's Carol Sherman. We really can't have this podcast without Carol.
I've always wondered though, is Carol more of a blood or a crypt? That's kind of been my
I don't know. And Carol sent me a really helpful email a couple of weeks ago based on our session. So keep those cards and letters coming. She says she's a wimp.
Perfect.
All right. So I don't know. It's a couple of minutes after the hour. No, it's not yet. It's only 1 minute after the hour. The room is still filling up. What shall we ask our audience today as they're getting settled in their seats?
It's back to school time. So does that change your routine? Like where are people in their life stage? Are you got little ones and you're going to buy lunch boxes, or they're long gone and you're just upset because there's going to be more traffic on the road? So how does back to school time disrupt your routine, or does it?
Yeah. And I'll share while people are starting to type that in. In our household situation, of course, my office is at home, so it doesn't affect me particularly. My wife works outside in an office, works in an office 3 days a week usually, and at home 2 days a week. And it definitely affects her whole view of life when the traffic starts to gear up for school.
I find as a speaker, though, that the two busiest months of the year for me for the last 28 years have been May and September.
Absolutely, me too.
My rationale is for May.
You're right.
Oh my goodness, summer is coming. We got to do something. And then they have an event. And then after in September, people go, oh my goodness, summer is over. We got to do something. So I find those to be typically my two busiest months.
May, September, October, the busiest. So Sanjay, why don't you read us some of the comments to answer our question, and then we'll play the music and get started.
So Lynn's got hold on.
You do know how to use the scroll button.
Here we go. Yeah, April is saying 7 a.m. More people on the road. Yes, takes me longer to get to the office than usual, so it's traffic related. Jamie's saying for sure, back to school in our house means we have to be much more organized in the morning, get everyone at the door on time. Absolutely. My children have graduated, but I still look for a reason to buy school supplies in the fall. Yeah, Shannon, you need therapy for that. Don't worry about it. Frederick saying my oldest just started his career position working from home, and my youngest is in high school. Just gets busier.
Busier.
Hello from Toronto. More AM PM prep, but more quiet during the day. Yeah, that's true, right? You give it up. It gets more hectic before and after school, but during school, especially if you're working from home, you can get more done.
Very good. And Carol notices that Sanjay has new hair. That's the opposite of that is actually true. The place where he got his hair cut has more hair on the floor now than it did. Did anybody notice my haircut? Because I too got a haircut, but I guess we just notice it more on Sanjay.
There you go. It's because my hair is dark and yours is light. It blends in.
That's right. You know,
Perfect.
when I hope to have a chance to meet everybody who comes to every other Wednesday in person. You will find out, it's absolutely true, that my hair is a lot darker in person than it is under these lights. It's true. I'm not making it up. It really is. I met somebody who had only ever seen me on Zoom, and they said, "Oh," they actually asked me, "Do you color your hair?" And I said, "No, I don't." But it looks dark. It looks darker in person. Thank you. All right, Carol
I
just noticed that I got a haircut. No, I got them all cut. Let's
I color
start.
mine white. I color mine white in person, so I look more wise.
Yes, okay. I have a lot of natural help with that. Let's go ahead and get started. Oh, Wayne says that's true. Oh, Wayne believes me. He's seen me in person, and it is a little darker.
I don't know.
Thank
I
you,
think
Wayne.
Wayne's a plant. I think that's just a
Thank you,
doppelganger
Wayne.
name
Thank
that you're
you.
using.
All right. Well, we
What
put
time is
this
it,
off.
Richard?
It's time for the music.
What time is it? It's time for another every other Wednesday.
I got to tell you, I'm glad that the theme song's not longer because I don't know if I could dance much longer than that. So,
Yeah, no, it'd be hard on the neck.
there you go.
So this is our back to school special today, and Sanjay and I want to talk about school and about cultures that support parents and families and school and everything to do with the family, really. So Sanjay,
Yeah,
why don't you first introduce yourself, and I'll do the same, and then just jump ahead.
So my name is Sanjay Nath. I live just outside of Toronto, Ontario in Canada, and I am a speaker and author focusing on performance and leadership. Mr. Haddon.
And I'm Richard Haddon, and I live in Jacksonville, Florida, and I'm a speaker and author focusing on recruiting, retention, and employee engagement.
Now, did you actually have that memorized, or did you actually have to read it from somewhere? You can.
I have it memorized.
Okay, good for you.
Absolutely, it's part of the core memory.
So one of the things we were looking at doing in this episode is exploring this notion of, because it's back to school, of how the more effective organizations and corporations are able to look at and view employees beyond the employee, but looking at the family as an extension of the employee. And if you can keep the employee happy, that's one thing. But one of the ways of doing that, and especially in this day and age where it's hard to find workers, is how do we engage and invite and make the family part of the process, whether that's the kids and or the significant others, and going beyond the, having someone dress up like Santa Claus and hand out Christmas gifts in December.
Yeah.
So
how do you do that, Sanjay? You've seen it.
Well,
you've seen things. I've seen some things.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, I'll share. I've been doing a lot of work with an organization lately, and I'm not going to say who they are because I have enough good and bad things to say about them. And my kind of rule of thumb is, if I have something good to say, I'll mention who the organization is. But if I have less than flattering things, I don't always want to say it. So one of the bigger wigs within the organization constantly refers to the employees as assets. And he talks about squeezing the assets. And it's about getting as much as you can, squeeze that rock, get the blood. And that makes and runs the organization more efficiently, which I actually do agree it does. It makes more money and increases the bottom line in the short term. However, where I think this senior bigwig lacks the vision is that is not a sustainable process. And even within the organization itself, I've seen clusters and subgroups and smaller parts of the organization not buy into the philosophy. And it's funny because the buzz in the hallways is very much, "Oh, don't mind him, he's old school." And that's the phrase that almost has become acceptable for explaining his behavior, which is, "Oh, don't worry, he's old school." And on one hand, I go, I like that because people roll their eyes and just go, "Well, that's just him." But at the same time, why is it still acceptable? If it's old school, get rid of the problem. But what I've seen within the organization is you have these subgroups and subcultures popping up that treat people whole body. I'll give you an example. There's one group where this is how it runs: is there's a supervisor, and below the supervisor is a manager, and then there's a team of about 20 people. And so the supervisor and the manager very much buy into the whole view of philosophy of treating employees as wholes. Even though from the top, they're kind of getting in trouble for it, but they still see the value in doing it. So one of the things they do, and this is it's a very blue collar kind of environment. And the supervisor does this thing where on everyone's birthday, he shows up with a handwritten note and a $50 gift card. And so I was being told the story that he showed up one day, and he does it he has fun doing it. He doesn't just show up and check the box going, oh, I've done that, here you go, and throw it at them. So the story goes, one time he was bringing the card in, and he found the one employee and pulls him aside, and now the employee
By the way, I have a demonstration. Now this one is only for $5, but I think you get the idea.
Absolutely. So he shows up, finds this one guy, Peter. Now Peter doesn't Peter doesn't know that the supervisor knows it's his birthday, right? So supervisor finds him and says, hey, Peter, hate to do this to you last minute. Peter's just walking in the door first thing in the morning. Goes, I hate to do this to you last minute, but I need you to work late tonight. You got to stay till 7. And but he explained it. Peter kind of rolled his eyes and went, really? Oh man, are you serious? And the supervisor goes, no, I'm just joking with you. And he says, happy birthday, and he gave him the card. And Peter apparently smiled ear to ear. Later that day, the supervisor got a text from Peter saying, hey, you know what? I don't think I've ever worked for an employer that recognized my birthday, let alone got me something. You guys are fantastic to work for. But here's the point, that $50, if Peter needed to work late next year at 7 p.m., I'm not saying he would, but I'm going, the probability of him being willing to do that increases tenfold with that simple little gesture.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I learned a lesson along about that. I mean, we are eventually going to talk about school and school kids and all of that, but if we just talk about family and doing things like that, I learned a lesson a few years ago from, and again, I won't mention the name of the company. I won't tell the whole big long story, but there was I met a fellow who works on the front line in a retail establishment, and he had come to the United States from the Philippines when he was a teenager. And he had a lot of siblings, but he had one sibling that was still in the Philippines. About a year before I met him, his sister, who was still in the Philippines, announced she was coming to the United States for the first time ever. But all of the other siblings lived about a 6-hour drive away. So he was trying to figure out how he can put all his PTO together and take some time without pay and all this kind of stuff, so he could drive back and forth on the week, so he wouldn't have to drive back and forth every weekend and that kind of thing. His manager found out about it and said, whoa, wait a minute. We got 2 or 3 locations down in that area where you're trying to get to. Why don't we just plug you in down there for about 3 months? How would that be? And I tell this story, when I'm speaking to audiences, and I can see the kind of the tears start to well up. It's an absolutely true story. And what I learned from it was, he said, they didn't have to do that. And he said, I started becoming of the belief that, there's some things around here I don't have to do, but I will, and so I think when it comes to things like this with your family, here's the problem, Sanjay, that I so often see. People say, well, we're complying with everything that we're required to do on that. And I think if that's all you're doing, then the people who work with you, they're going to do just what they're required to do. And they say, yeah, but we're following the law. We don't, the law says we don't have to. Nobody cares about the law when it comes to that. I'm not promoting lawlessness. What I am promoting is this, and I heard this phrase years ago, and I have called on it so many times, and that is this. And this is especially for my HR friends who are in the audience, and that is, the law is hardly a lofty standard. What do you think about that, Sanjay?
100%. Again, and going back to the giving a $50 card, there's no legal requirement to do so.
Right.
But those small deposits, make a big difference. And in fact, I'm going to throw another story from the same organization.
Okay.
This is now to do with the supervisor and the manager. And so the manager had been there forever. The supervisor was new, and the manager was taking a week off. So it was his vacation, whatever. And the supervisor, that week, all hell broke loose. At one point, 3 of the 4 days or something, in a 3 out of a 4-day span, 30% of the workforce didn't come in. And they were, required, they still had to operate and stuff. So what ended up happening was the manager came in 4 of the 7 days of his vacation to come and help. And again, the way it was explained to me was, it wasn't required. The manager actually volunteered. He said, look, I really want to help. This is what I do. And so anyways, all said and done, when the dust settled, manager returned back to work. Supervisor went to him and said, look, he said to him, you really suck at taking vacation. He goes, so I want to say, as a thank you, I want to get you something. And the manager's response was, no. You don't need to get me anything. It's part of my job. He said, I'm an all-in kind of guy. At which point the supervisor said, he said, I'm an all-in kind of guy. I want to be viewed more than just an employee. And the supervisor said, I view you well beyond an employee. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, you're a partner in this with me. He goes, but I'm still going to get you something. So why not? Don't make me waste money. Just tell me what you want.
Yeah, exactly.
And so he hummed and hawed, and this is what he came back with. He asked for a freaking baseball hat. And so the supervisor got it for him, and it was like some special editions baseball, whatever it was. And he goes, that's a good start. He said, but pick a day. I'm going to get you and your wife to go to the baseball game. And the response from the manager was, really? Like, eyes pop out of his head, you would do that? And so he ended up taking, he ended up sending the husband and wife to the game. But the rationale from the supervisor was this. He said, I'm taking, like, specifically on this vacation, I took, for 4 of 7 days, I took him away from her, right? I took the husband away from the wife in this particular dynamic. And so it's just as important to reward her as it is to reward him. And he apparently shows a baseball fan, and they went, and it started a winning streak for their team, and they were, everyone was ecstatic. But again, it's not just how do we. And by the way, what were the tickets? I don't know, a couple $100 for the night out. Throwing the baseball hat, it's a couple $100. If you
huge ROI on that,
right? There's huge ROI. You could throw it on the paycheck as a bonus, but it's basically lost. But you want to be building these relationships and the dynamics that go beyond just the employee, but also how can you incorporate the family? How can you incorporate the significant other and the kids? And we haven't really talked about kids, so let's do that. I mean, Stephen's referring to
look at Frederick's comment. Yeah. Frederick says that is the quiet quitting trend in a nutshell, that we're hearing a lot about. We can't expect extra effort from employees when we are only concerned with offering the minimum. And it's funny because, Sanjay, what did you and I talk about as we were discussing weeks ago, wink, wink, as we were discussing this episode? We discussed talking about what?
Yeah, exactly that.
Quiet quitting. Yeah. And we may still do that. But as Frederick points out, we just did. This is kind of part of it. And Steve says, you used to call that deposits in the emotional bank account. And I think we can still call it that.
It absolutely is. And so let me ask this, and throw this out to the studio audience, which is, what are some of the emotional deposits that either you've seen or that you have done to engage the employee as a whole body person, as part of that relationship dynamic? Mother, father, husband, wife, brother, sister, significant other.
Yeah, and we know that families today can be described in any number of ways, and it's not necessarily the way we described them 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago. So when we talk about families, that's a big, a big group anymore. As people are typing things in, I see Ada and April have started some things. I'll share a couple of more examples just as people are typing that in, and it calls back to what you said a minute ago, Sanjay, and that is, and I've heard of this happening. I've seen this in organizations that I've worked with, and I've read about it, and probably people out there in the studio audience have done this. And that is, say somebody's worked extra hard, working extra long, they've been away from home, maybe they're traveling a lot or whatever, and sometimes we'll get them a gift card for their favorite restaurant. What about finding out their spouse or partner or significant other's favorite restaurant and getting them a card for that? Then you make your employee the hero. Hey, we're going to such and such, even if it's a place they don't want to go, even if, can I say Dave and Buster's or something like that, where the kids love to go, but maybe the parents don't. But now you've made them a hero. And even something like sending flowers and by the way, guys like to get flowers too. So sending flowers to the home when someone's spouse or partner has been away from a long time. Yeah, you want to thank the employee, but thank their family as well.
Yeah.
So let's read some of the great ideas that have come in.
Okay, so we have well, this is what Ada was saying, is the idea of quiet quitting isn't as bad as people who quit mentally and stay and collect a paycheck.
Yeah,
Which,
yeah. And as I understand quiet quitting, that's kind of what that is. It's they quit, they just didn't tell you.
Yeah, hopefully, but again, yeah, that's what you want. Is you want to create that environment where people get to go to work, they don't have to. And when you have that synergy, people play off each other, and you create. I mean, this is what we've talked about, is organizational culture. Is if it's cool to be successful and to do your work and to have fun doing it, and someone comes counter to that, you have that peer policing of people going, that's not the way we do it here. Either quit being a jerk or leave. April mentions Christmas party for staff and their family members, as well as summer barbecues and parties. And again, the beauty of all that is it allows people to know each other beyond just work. You have that social element.
And of course, if they don't like each other, they can avoid each other. But I've seen situations where families got to know families, kids got to know kids, and built that network that way. Ada says recently had a record year, and corporate office sent every branch funds to hold a celebration party. It was great, but was for staff only, not spouses. And there probably are some of those staff who liked it that way, but I bet that most people would have preferred to have included their families.
And I think it doesn't have to be everything, because then all of a sudden you run into the cost of it, right? But I think there's got to be a way of recognizing them, whether it's a showcase or whether it's a, again, if money's an issue, then you don't do it every time, but maybe once a year it has something. The more we can do it, the more we can recognize people as three-dimensional, not two-dimensional. Not you are a worker bee and you are a robot, and 9 to 5 you come here, and then at 5 o'clock you turn it off. And remember, people take their emotional baggage of work and the stress home. No matter what job you're in, no matter how high or low stress it is, it goes home with them. So as much as we can recognize that and appreciate it and support it, we're going to get buy-in. We're depositing that emotional bank account so that when we do need a withdrawal because things go crazy, or because there's a pandemic, or because volume increases or sales increase, or whatever it is, they're going to be much more likely to come play with us.
So what about the situation where school has now started, and you have a parent who's taking care of, of a child, and now that whole routine changes, and this happened a lot when I had school-age children, because I have one child who was particularly accident prone, and it was very often when we would get a phone call, Alec has broken his arm again, that kind of thing. I mean, we were lucky, because if I wasn't traveling, I'm working from home, and school was literally 2/10 of a mile from our house. But not everybody is in that situation. So how do employers handle it when life intervenes and something happens, their child is sick and not able to go to school, and that has taken on a whole different flavor since COVID, where you can't just say, well, maybe you're okay and you can go to school. No, you can't. If you've been diagnosed with COVID, how do you deal with that? How do you deal with it with the school child brings COVID home, and now you're exposed, and do you go back? There's a whole bunch of stuff with that. But even taking the whole COVID thing out of the picture, what about when your child is doing something special in school and it's in the middle of the day? Do you get a chance to experience that and to participate in that? Or to the employer, is it more important that you be there filling out those reports at that particular time? What are some, how do organizations effectively handle the fact that they have many employees who have children in school?
I think that a lot of times what people do, or organizations do, is they make the mistake of trying to make a rule.
Yes.
A rule rather than a value. And the rule says once a year or 6 times a year, you may be dismissed for 30 minutes to go to the dentist and watch your kid ballet recital.
Right.
And I think that the more prescriptive we try to become, the more we try to figure out what every path looks like, the more difficult it becomes to police. But people who want to circumvent and cheat the system will still circumvent and cheat the system.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
people who want to go with the spirit of the role are going to go with the spirit of the role. So as much as you can say, work with us, communicate with us, I think people will appreciate that. So I'm doing some work with a logistics company, and they have a lot of drivers, and that's one of the big mantras. They said, like, the worst thing they can do is have a driver not show up in the morning, and because then they have to scramble and figure out who's going to make the deliveries. And so the thing that they try to always say is, go look at, if you want to go to your kid's baseball game next Thursday, tell us, and we can arrange for it for next Thursday. But
Yeah.
do not call us Thursday morning going,
Right.
I'm sick, because that leaves us out there. And so the idea is, you're giving
love
up
that,
you're giving up your day's pay, right? If you're not working in this particular environment, that's the way it works. So we can work around that as long as we have the time. And if you're doing this, 4 times a week, well, then we have an issue. But as long as we can create the environment, create the culture where the organization allows for the communication, and people don't have to, have fear of reprimand of being punished because they're going to their kid's baseball game. I think, again, that the common sense piece kicks in, and people are like, oh, cool. All right, let's work with that. And I think
love
people
that, yeah.
appreciate that. It's got to be symbiotic, and it's got to work both ways. And I see all kinds of the chat blowing up here. What's it saying?
Yeah. I love this from Carol. She said, my daughter was in a swim meet for school, and one of the partners I worked for grabbed me and another employee who was into swimming and said, we're going to Rebecca's swim meet. That is cool, Carol. That's cool.
Yeah.
I love it. Yeah. And let me ask you, Carol, did the company experience any performance loss based on that event? I bet not.
And I would say it's probably the opposite. It probably makes people more relaxed, so that they kind of go, oh, this is the kind of place I want to be. And when they're more relaxed, they're going to produce better. Apparently, I've heard contented cows give better milk. I don't know.
So I hear. Where's my book? Where's my book? Yeah.
There you go. But again, if we go back earlier to Lynn's comment,
company collapsed, she said.
There's one place where she worked. They would give a pool amount of money and then let each department do what they wanted with it. And I'm a huge fan of that. When you give people autonomy and decision-making powers, more often than not, people will abuse the system. People will cheat and try to get away with stuff. But more often than not, especially too, if you've done a good job hiring, you're getting good people in there. They want to help. They want to play by the rules. They want to be successful. It's part of their identity. So the better we can equip and empower and trust our people, the more likely they're going to reward us for making those decisions.
Yeah, exactly. So what else? What else happens when kids are in school? I don't know. I mean, it's been a while since my kids were in school. Sanjay, it's not been a while for you. It's been a long time that they have been in school. How does this?
Well, I got to tell you, my employer is the biggest jerk in the world.
Right? Yeah. And even still, it works, huh?
Exactly. I think it's, and I've had those calls. I love it. Just calling the school calls, and they're almost trained to say it now. Just want to tell you everything's all right, but Davison bumped his head, or and I'm in a position, for the most part, I would say 80 to 90% of those calls I can just pop over and get the kid. But there are times where I'm not in the country or I'm not in the city, and obviously I have support networks to do that. But not everyone does. And I think it just really comes down to, if the organization is too dense to appreciate that it actually benefits them, it's a matter of expressing it to them in the value that they understand the business case for why you should be doing it. Because if you don't do it and that person is really productive and they leave because you're being militant about their family and how they cannot interact with them, the cost that you need to train someone else to get to that person up to that speed is going to be significantly more than them going to a swim meet with Carol's buddy every 6 months or once a year.
Yeah, it almost reminds me of when you go into a restaurant and they say, I'm sorry, there's going to be a 20-minute wait. And you say, I'm sorry, I can't wait. And you get in the car and you go and you drive 15 minutes and you get someplace and there's a 15-minute wait. You've just burned 10 minutes. Nemalia is asking, this is a absolutely perfect question. Is there something people have done specifically to support employees as they go through this stressful time in support with kids returning to school? While some of our, I know, Sanjay, you'll want to respond. I want to respond. Our audience will want to respond. While that's happening, let me just remind you something that Sanjay said, and I think it is the start of coming up with your own specific ideas, and that is, rather than making a rule, make a value. And that is, we want our employees to be supported. We want them to have the presence of mind, the freedom of mind to be able to do their work. And if you're worried about anything, you can't be fully engaged in your work. And certainly if you're worried about your child, you can't be fully engaged in your work. And I'll even say one other thing, and this started to come out. If you remember, if we go back 2.5 years to COVID, COVID started in March of 2020. Schools were still in session in most places. And, suddenly everybody was sent home, but maybe you were in a job that you couldn't do from home. You were deemed essential, or for some reason you could go into your place of business and do your work. And people began to have to make some really tough choices. And I strongly believe that you must never ask someone to choose between their child and their career, because no matter how they choose, you will lose. If you ask them to make the choice, doesn't matter how they choose, you've lost already.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what are some things that organizations can do that make it all work?
I think that you quoting me was brilliant.
Yes. And I would expect the same from you, my friend.
Exactly. No, but this notion of starting from the value as opposed to starting from the rule. This is what happens. This is how rules come about in an organization. Someone screws up. So we have the Richard rule. Richard did this, or Richard went and he watched his kid play baseball 3 times in a week. So we make the Richard rule. The Richard rule is work first and you never to watch your kid play baseball, or whatever the rule is. And then so someone says that and they go, oh, well, I'm not going to break the rule. It said I can't watch my kid play baseball, but I can go watch him play football. And so we created another rule. And then what ends up happening is you have these 1,700 rules, but they don't get to the flavor of what you're trying to say. And what you're trying to say is, our expectation is that you are here at work producing the best work you can. Now, when there are exceptions to that, you manage to the exception and don't make a blanket rule, because it just messes up everyone. And so I think that's where we start from. We start going, the value is do a good job, do it safe, but we want you engaged. And if someone comes to me and goes, in order for me to be engaged, it's helpful if I can go watch my kid do this lesson, do this competition, watch this, etc., then we deal with it in that moment, as opposed to making a blanket rule for everyone that says it must always be this way or never that way. Because again, doesn't matter what the rule is, you run into 2 problems. Number one is it alienates people. And number 2 is there's always a significant cost to try and enforce the rule. So you have the choice of either not enforcing the rule, in which case people go, well, these guys don't know what they're saying. They talk out both sides of the mouth. They don't reinforce. Or you enforce the rule and it's really costly. Whereas if you get away from the rules altogether and you instead push on the value and kind of going, this is what's important to us. How do we implement this? We're open to suggestions. We want to have a dialogue, because that's the other thing too, is values lead to dialogue. Dialogue makes people feel that they're part of the thing, and they should be. And you come to a universal decision, or what's the word I'm looking for, more of a consensus kind of agreement, then you have much more buy-in.
Look at Steve's comment here. That's perfect. Sometimes it's a matter of empathy. It's just a matter of acknowledging it can be a difficult time. How are you doing? Is there anything we can do to make it a little easier? I think when you ask that question, you certainly enable the employee to give you the answer of what can be done.
Yeah.
Let me share with you two more examples that I know of that relate to school kids in clients that I've worked with. One, could be seen as a negative turned into a positive, and one was a positive turned into an even more positive. I'll start with the more positive one. And that was, I knew a guy whose son became the Wisconsin state wrestling champion for the state of Wisconsin in high school. And the CEO of the company didn't even really know this guy all that well. He knew he was in the company, but it wasn't a CEO facing kind of a role. CEO found out about it and sent the young man a letter to his house. Congratulations! I saw in the newspaper that you had achieved this. Well, there was not a a gift card. There was not anything but a letter from the CEO. But I'll tell you what, when the father got home after work that day, there was the son standing at there. Look what I got in the mail today. You'll believe this. I'll tell you one other quick story, and that was a salesperson. This is a woman who was in a sales position, and she had a child at home who was suddenly having a great deal of difficulty in school. It was causing her to be not only more time at work and away from work, but also consuming an awful lot of her emotional energy because of the trouble this child was having, especially in one particular subject. This is a relatively small company. The president of the company said, how about if we get her a tutor? And they hired a tutor to work with this child. After about 3 months, there was significant improvement. And oh, by the way, there was significant improvement in the performance of the employee. So again, that's not a rule. It's what can we do? There's a problem. Let's see what we can do to relieve it. And that might have some positive impact on what's happening in our company. Now, the interesting thing is someone came to the president of the company and said, well, you didn't pay for my kids to get tutoring. And the president looked and said, you don't even have any kids. Shut up. You may not agree with that. You may not agree with that forthright answer, but it's the thing, no, I'm not going to pay for your kids' tutoring because you don't have any kids. But I'll tell you what, if you have a need, you can be sure I'm going to do whatever I can to make sure it is not a problem for you.
Let's to what Paula said here in the chat. She said, flexibility and fairness keeps everyone happy. And I think that is so paramount. It's about fairness and not about equality, right? And this is what she was pushing for. She's like, well, you pay for their kids, you have to pay for my kids. Well, no, because, well, do you have kids? How old are your kids? Are your kids struggling? Does it affect your work performance? So treating people fairly. And here's the other thing too, is if I have an employee who is fantastic and bending over backwards and doing backflips and helping, and they need some help, as an employer, I'm going to bend over backwards to help them. Whereas I have someone who does the minimum and gets by and is always looking for a handout and is always looking to cheat the system and steal and all that sort of thing. Yeah, I'm not going to be nearly as open. And to me, that's fairness. You earn the right and the respect to the relationship in which you're involved. But I think it's on the onus of the employer to set that table, to set that example, to say, I'm going to trust you, and here's how I'm going to do it. And if people live up to it, then you elevate and you level up. And if they don't, that's when you back off and go, okay. It's like a teacher in a classroom. Yeah, it's really difficult to be a teacher because there's 30 kids in the class and there's 30 different learning styles. And what works when you challenge this kid over here, they thrive. But when you challenge this kid over here, they carry away and they shut down. And it's the same thing with people in the workplace. What is the drivers? What gets them going? How do you engage them? And it changes from person to person. And it's not a universal formula that says one size fits all. And it's about being creative. Even if you're in an environment where they're not supportive of it, there are ways in which you can do it. There are ways you can be creative or clever or sly or whatever it is, so that people still feel like they're part of the team, that they feel more than just a number, and their whole body, every dimension of their life is appreciated. If they're a biker, you tell them about the biking show that's coming up. It doesn't have to cost you anything. It doesn't mean you have to go buy them a fancy new bike, but it still engages them, and it acknowledges that I know that you're more than just an employee, and you're more than just a widget fixer-upper, that you're a full body, whole person, and I want to acknowledge that, and I want to try to satisfy and help you be empowered in every area of your life.
Ooh, look at April's suggestion. Allowing employees to change their schedules twice a year has been a positive for me. I have several folks who have a summer schedule and a school schedule. I also allow split shifts. That sounds like a great solution in that particular situation. And I love the stuff going on in the chat, people just helping each other.
And then given the fact that they're able to do that, I think again, that's beautiful, giving them the autonomy, giving them, and by the way, all of this is prefaced or based on the premise that people are getting their work done. Right?
Exactly. You've got to maintain that standard, because the very fastest way for people to say, oh, all this stuff is nonsense, is to, first of all, have wildly different standards for one person over another. But then if the organization begins to see productivity failing, costs going up, revenue decreasing, now you do have a problem. But if you maintain those standards, I assert, and I know Sanjay, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I know you agree. So I did just put words in your mouth. You can still do that, maintaining those high standards and still do the kinds of things we're talking about.
Too many organizations, though, they start from the assumption that, oh, the standards won't be maintained.
Right. Yeah.
We can't do it because if they work from home, they're going to cheat us. Well,
yeah.
Why do you believe that? And again, you hired them because you believe and you trust them. So give them that inch. And if they steal the mile, okay, deal with it then. But if you give them an inch and they only take half an inch and they're producing at the same level, why do you care? We don't, we too often we get so obsessed with the form. And the language I've always used is, I want to, as an employer, as an organization, I want to dictate the outcome and not the process, because your process may be a heck of a lot better than mine. I may have done it by putting the left hand first and then the right hand, but all of a sudden you're using your teeth and I didn't even thought about it, and you're 3 times more efficient than I am. So why would I slow you down with my thought process? Now, if you want my input, I'm happy to give it to you. It's a starting platform from which to launch. But I don't want to tell you how to do it because I don't know. There we go.
Steve asked the question, how do you feel about referring to employees as our valuable resource versus asset?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, I like valuable resource over asset. I mean, again, asset takes the human piece out of it. An asset's a widget making machine. But here's the thing: is it's more important than the wording. Is what's the connotation within the organizational culture? Yeah. Right, because it reminds me, I don't know why it does, but because I hate them, but the Boston Red Sox won the World Series in, I don't know, 2003 or something. And they had this thing in the clubhouse where they referred to themselves as a bunch of idiots. We're just a bunch of idiots, and they ended up winning. But within them, the connotation of a bunch of idiots meant we're just a bunch of guys, just regular guys doing our thing, and they were able to buy into that. They created the culture for winning through that. Now, personally, I think calling people a bunch of idiots is insulting, but I'm a third party observer. If within the organization it works, great. So whether you call them assets or they call them maybe valuable resources, I think I have a preference, but I think it's more important that you have buy-in from the team.
And I think I agree. And I also think it's important that if you're going to say they're your most valuable resource or asset, or as others have suggested, team members or partners or members or research, if you're going to say they're your most valuable or that they are valuable, people are going to be looking for the evidence. So if you're going to say, I don't care what you call them, if you say that they are super, super valuable and super important to you, let's see what that looks like. Show me. Don't just tell me that.
So Randy here has a question. Dictate the outcome, not the process. How would you approach assigning a budget to achieve the outcome, especially if you're not giving them the process? Throw it to you, Richard. What are your thoughts on that?
I would say, if they have a process, see how that works, and if they don't, obviously give them a process. There's some things that have to be done in a certain way, but other things that don't. Perfect example. We've only got a couple of minutes left, and now I'll date myself. But Willie Mays, the legendary baseball player, when he first started playing, it was said this man does not know how to catch a ball. The trouble was he never dropped the ball, but he doesn't know how to do it. He's not doing it the right way, and he continued to win games and continue to win games. So is it important that you catch the ball the right way, or is it important that you not drop the ball? That's the way that I look at it. Now, if you don't know how to not drop the ball, then you need to be open to people who do and can help you with that. But we have probably all worked with people. I know at one point I had someone who worked with me. It was just amazing. All I needed to say to this person was, here is what I need to have happen. And I never told her how to do it. And wow, it just happened. There are other people I've worked with that if I didn't give them more support, more specifics on that, they would be out of their depth on that until they learned the process. So I think it's a balancing.
Yeah, and I mean, really what it comes down to, Randy, is what's the activity, what's it worth to you, right? Because if it's a $100 job, well, what do you assign to that? Well, you kind of go, well, I'm willing to put $50 into it because I need a little bit of profit margin, I need a little bit of a safety factor there, or what have you. So I think you actually have to kind of go, well, what is this project worth? And because it also might be a lost leader. It might be, well, this thing is going to actually lead us to more business, so I'm willing to do that. So I think that really what you do is you figure out what it's worth, and then you assign a percentage of that and put some sort of safety factor in it as well.
I knew I could count on you to give us a numeric answer, Sanjay. So thank you. Thank you. Gosh, our time is up. Can you believe it? Don't go anywhere. Don't go anywhere. But
Speaking of numeric answers, I have to say earlier in the conversation, you did say it was 0.2 of a mile. I just want to say that's
oh yeah, right. That's how many
320 meters for
you.
for you metric folk out there.
For everybody else in the world. Yeah. Okay. Great. Well, I'll tell you what, please let us know if we can be of help to you. There is Mike Kerr and Jeff Tobe, along with Sanjay Nath and me, Richard Haddon, and we can come to your organization virtually or in person and do the same, have the same kind of discussion. We'll be back in 2 weeks on September the 7th. And when I say we, I'm talking about my 3 friends, because I will not be here on September the 7th. And hopefully the 3 of them will be. So what else have you got for us, Sanjay?
I just want to say thank you very much. We appreciate you guys coming out here. If you know other people that would benefit from hearing our discussion,
please
let us know. If you have ideas for topics you want to hear, or you're potentially interested in being a guest, we'd love to hear from you as well. Otherwise, I would say we will see you every other Wednesday.
Every other Wednesday. Bye.
Thanks, folks.